All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Milo. I work here at the bookstore, and I'm going to be our tour guide a little bit tonight. Well, this afternoon, this day, night.
Yes.
Before we get started, I want to go ahead and acknowledge that we gather here on the traditional lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present. Let's take a moment to honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe, a people who are still here, continuing to bring their heritage in this place to life. And acknowledgement is only the beginning, so if you are able, please feel free to check out realrentduwamish.org, where you can send funds directly to Duwamish outreach and cultural life. I would also like to recommend at this moment that you silence your cell phones, because or else they will take to an operatic song in the midst of the event. Without further ado, it's really a pleasure to have Alice Chao with us today. She's a Chinese-Canadian author of the #1 Sunday Times bestseller, Shanghai Immortal from Potter State. She's fascinated by the interplay between self-perceived versus imposed identity and how this intersects with belonging, and enjoys exploring these spaces in her stories. A recovering lawyer and a Xiaolong Bao enthusiast, she knits to soothe anxiety and has a deep, abiding love for hokonichi planners and kawaii planner stickers. So this is a dangerous part of the story.
I was already in there. I was like, oh, all the things.
I heard you talking about it. So, for anyone who hasn't cracked into Shanghai Immortal yet, do you want to give us just kind of an outline of what we need to know before discussing it? Can you hear me? Sometimes it helps if you hold it close, and then it's really loud if you have soft spoken.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's really loud. Okay, I'll just hold it like this. My uncle actually asked me to explain to him in 5 minutes what the story was about, but he made me do it in Chinese, and it took me 45 minutes. It was really hard. But okay, let's see, my elevator pitch. It is a story about a half fox spirit, half vampire, sasshole. She's a bratty asshole. Really sorry. And it's a story about found family and figuring out who you are and carving a space for you and not allowing other people to define you. And there's romance and shenanigans and, various cameos from Chinese mythology.
There's definitely shenanigans.
There's a lot of shenanigans.
I feel like shenanigans is the perfect word to describe this book.
Yeah, for sure.
So immediately off the bat, the first thing I ever kind of learned about this book was the term sasshole. and that to describe Lady Jing, who's our main character. And you will find, if you read the book, or you have found if you've already read it, that she is a narrator to remember. She has such a clear voice. She's so specific. She's so opinionated. What was your favorite thing about writing from her perspective?
Oh, it was so cathartic to have a character who is so unapologetic about telling everybody to F off.
Yes.
She just does what she wants to do. She doesn't care. She's and I mean, it's not that she's nasty about it. She's not mean-spirited. But she basically is very kind of take no shit, do no harm.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great. And it was written during the pandemic as well. So we were all locked down. We couldn't go anywhere. And to have a character who was yeah, I'm going to do whatever I want. Who cares what anybody thinks? Was really cathartic.
That makes so much sense. She was kind of living the dream that we were all going to parties. Running across rooftops. Yeah, for sure. I mentioned this to you earlier. Her favorite cuss word changes throughout the book. She'll have a cuss she's using all the time, and it kind of transitions a couple times.
Yeah.
I wanted to know if that was intentional, or if you were just I'm just gonna mix it up, just add a different cuss.
I think I just wanted to mix it up. She has ones that she likes to say, and I mean, probably my editor had something to do with it as well. I used a lot of tatas in the story, and my editor was you need to cut them down. You need to start saying boobs, chest, breast, something other than
rein in the tatas.
Yeah,
people.
And I mean, I did, but I think there was still commentary there's too many. I'm well, I don't know. When I wrote them, I thought they were it made me giggle every time I wrote it, because I was it's such a ridiculous way to refer to anatomy.
Yeah.
And I was yeah, okay. I was going to call it boba, because that's actually what it means in Chinese. Boba means big boobs, which we use for bubble tea, which makes me really giggle every time.
I
But
didn't know that. Now I'm gonna giggle every time.
in Chinese, it's like slang for big boobs, and which has been adopted into bubble tea culture. But it just didn't float as well. So it's decked with tatas.
And it's super funny every time. I will
I
have you
think
know.
so. I think so. I'm glad you enjoyed it as well.
So everyone get ready for some major tatas when you get to this book. So kind of also reflecting on the character of Lady Jing, in your author's note, you write that when you were growing up, you didn't have that many pieces of media that reflected like your identity as a Chinese Canadian teenager. I kind of want to know what you think your teenage self would think about Jing and her friends and her frenemies and her enemies and her close friends.
I like to think my teenage self would really enjoy it. Probably get a thrill out of all of the swear words and there's a lot of Easter eggs. So if you study Mandarin or speak Mandarin, there's a lot of Easter eggs. A lot of the swear words are actually translations. Sometimes literal, sometimes like vibe-esque translations of cuss words that, like when I was growing up, I was not allowed to cuss in Chinese. Like my parents never cussed in Chinese. It never hurt them. So I never did it because I knew if I did, I would like get the bollocking in my life. But like, to have a character do that, it's like, yeah, cool.
Yeah. I like it to like let out all the
Let it out.
cusses.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, so she's part fox spirit and part vampire, and she mentions feeling like she doesn't like feel like she belongs anywhere. And then Mr. Lee, who we will all meet reading the book, also mentions that like being from China but spending much of his life in the United States, he also sometimes feels like he doesn't belong. And I would love to know more about like whether those journeys reflect your own like journey of belonging, or whether you're just like the exploration of kind of dual identity in the book.
Yeah, there's definitely parts of my journey in there. The idea of being like having one foot in one culture and another foot in another culture and being that bridge, being able to code switch, but sometimes feeling like, like I grew up in a Chinese community, and my parents' generation basically called me the little foreigner because I was very Canadian, grew up, all my friends were Canadian. I didn't have very many Chinese friends my age. So they were like, oh, well, you're a little Canadian. But then for my friends, they were like, oh, you're Chinese, because they didn't have very many Chinese friends. And I was like one of the few. So, that was just, it's a spotlight that you become aware of. And I'm sure like a lot of you will understand what it feels like to be kind of like the one that's different. And sometimes it's great. And sometimes, it can cause friction, and it can, especially when you're young and it's pointed out to you and you think you're totally normal, you think there's no difference, and then somebody points it out to you and you're like, oh, right. So I was really lucky. I didn't have such a bad time. But a lot of Lady Jing is an amalgamation of a lot of stories that came out during the pandemic by a lot of diaspora and their experiences, and feeling like, I think there's a lot of, you don't feel like you belong, and you don't feel like you're enough of one culture to claim that culture, even though I think you are, whether you're like the whole, oh, you have to be 100%, or, what the whole like measuring your, I don't like that. Like if you have that experience and it's within your family or within like where you grew up, like that's you, that's your identity. Everybody's intersectional, and like there is no measuring like, oh, well, this is only 25%, so it doesn't count, like it is, you are who you are, and all of these things shape you. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing like that with us through this story. And it's it also makes me think of when you're talking about kind of your interests as an author, you talk about like the identity you find within yourself versus like what's kind of imposed on you by others. And that's such a big part of Lady Jing's journey, like going from kind of really seeing herself as kind of as the worst things other people see about her, to kind of finding an identity or like that she's
comfortable with.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, like, I think a lot of kids are like this, they internalize the bad things. You tell a kid once, oh, you're clumsy or you're fat. I mean, that is terrible. It's like, no, you're perfect. You're perfect just as you are. And you are who you are. Don't internalize what other people voice as negative, because it's like, no, what they think doesn't reflect on you. And that's like, I've got an 11-year-old kid, and she's at that age where, puberty and all the hormones, and really starting to pay attention to what her peers are saying. And I mean, 11, they're all going to say like ridiculous things.
For sure.
And like that whole, learning to listen to the voice inside you, and like who you are, and knowing who you are, like that's a journey. Even like I'm like 50, and I still sometimes have to stop and be like, okay, right. You don't have to listen to that voice out there. Like it has no bearing on who you really are. You know who you are.
That's a serious, like, lifelong journey.
It's a lifelong journey, and it doesn't get easier, but I think as you get older and you do it more, maybe like those tools become second nature. Or I hope that's the case, because I still feel like a mess, I'm like, into my 51st year, so. Yeah.
And for her, it's such a journey of like bravery. Like she really has to like find courage and like face the things she's most afraid of.
Yeah, totally.
Which also kind of seems to reflect the way that can go in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Like try to, it is like, there's a lot of things that I put in the book that I was like, oh, these are journeys, and these are things that I would like to be true. I don't know if they still are. I don't know if they can be true for everybody, but at least, trying to attempt to find that courage and not let other people get you down,
For sure. Has your daughter read any of this book?
She was very
Is she
excited.
allowed to read?
Well, there's a lot of swears in it. And I was like, So I was like, look, so long as you understand that you shouldn't use these curse words at school where your teacher's going to hear you, like be very specific about your environment when you decide to use this word. Anyway, so I was like, sure, okay, you can read it. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to read it. And I gave her the book. And the next day I was like, so did you start? And she's like, no. I'm like, why? She's like, there's too many words, mommy. I was like, well, this book, like it's got 100,000 words in it. Yeah, there's a lot of words.
That was the danger of a book.
So she was not into it. It was like not enough. Like she's into Keeper of the Lost Cities. Like that kind of thing.
That's
Manga,
right
Demon
now.
Slayer. Yeah, so
Nice.
my book is not cool enough for her.
I bet eventually she'll like crack into it. She'll be like,
Maybe, I don't
oh my
know.
God.
And she'll probably be like, mommy, there's so many swear words and boobs. I'm like, yeah, okay.
I look forward to hearing about how she reacts.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, me too. I'm a little scared, but
Oh, I thought she'll love it. So on a slightly different note, Shanghai Immortal is a fantasy, but it also is a period piece, and it also is a mythological reinterpretation. And I'm really curious about what your research process looked like, both delving into like Shanghai in the 1930s and like what kind of candies would be available and what kind of like that's a big thing I noticed. And then you also kind of interpret like myths in different ways and like form new kind of world building around different myths. And like I'm just wondering how that all came together and like what came first.
okay, so let's go with the myths and the retelling first. So I come from a background where I've watched a lot of Hong Kong flicks, and the Hong Kong movie industry has for many decades, they basically take a lot of this mythology and they recreate them, and they have slapstick, they have like all sorts of quite ridiculous scenarios. So that to me was very freeing, because I was like, well, I can do that. I can make them into modern day characters. I can make them ridiculous. I can make them sweet. It doesn't really matter. So I was like, okay, that was already in my mindset. So that was really cool. And then the actual research was twofold. So I did a lot of maps, like looking at maps on Google, like Googling a lot of
love those good maps.
old maps. There's so many old maps, like military maps and like things that are available. So that was really fun to see how the city looked like in 1935. All the roads that they run down, the Bund, which is the main drag with all the foreign, sort of the Western powers, like the British built all these like really big buildings along banks and whatnot. And memoirs. I read memoirs, which were fascinating. Yeah, there's a woman called Emily Hahn, and her memoir, China to Me, is just, She was a real character. She was a journalist. She moved over there and she just was like, oh, her and her sister, I think they just were like, we're going to go to Shanghai. So they hopped a ship, moved to Shanghai. It's very cheap to live there. And she basically wrote a book about the Song sisters. So I don't know if you know much Chinese history, but Sun Yat-sen is the father of the Republic. He was the person who sort of inspired the final overthrow of the empire, like the imperial kind of family. He married a Sung sister. I think it was Mei Lin Sung. The other Sung sister married Chiang Kai-shek, who was the head of the nationalists. And then a third Sung sister is married, I think, to the economist who set up the banks or whatever in China. Anyway, so Emily Han interviewed them and wrote a book about them. So she was like back and forth into Chiang Kai-shek's house and Mei Lin Sung. And she was also partying. She had a monkey, and she's American from like Midwest somewhere. She also married a Chinese poet. She was his second wife. And then after that, she then married a British spy. And she spoke Mandarin. So she was a really interesting character, like fascinating. So her memoir was very interesting, and just I was like, what? Like, yeah, the kind of partying they did. Oh yeah, she's an opium addict as well. So.
That is like one of those times where you feel like someone's life story is stranger than fiction.
Yeah, and she was only there for like 4 years. So I was like,
most people do their whole life.
Yes, she lived hard.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Did the person who helped set up the banks inspire the character of Mr. Leo?
No, Mr. Lee. That I wanted. It was like a plot device that he's setting up the banks.
Sure.
But yeah, for him to, I think he's like, I made sure that he was timing wise, that he was one of the assistants to the person who set up the banks.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is a super interesting character because he and Lady Jane literally could not be more different.
No,
Like,
yes.
he's very proper, buttoned up, incredibly polite, incredibly just sort of like well-mannered and courtly, and she is, it's this sassful force in the world dynamic.
Yeah.
Kind of sweater boy and the absolute nightmare, if you're familiar with that kind of way of classification. Where did his inspiration come? Was he like always in your mind as kind of the opposites attract for her?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, he is, the trope there is grumpy and sunshine.
Yes.
Right? But it's turned on its head. Usually the grumpy is the guy, the sunshine is the girl. So I've turned it on the head, made Lady Jane grumpy, and Tony is the sunshine.
They're so grumpy and sunshine.
And so yeah,
It's perfect.
and he's just so kind. And he is really, he's modeled after K-drama and C-drama, specific kind of East Asian masculinity, which is like very proper, very kind, very lots of integrity. There's a very clear-cut ethical kind of like system of values, and it's not your typical Western alpha masculinity. It's not quite cinnamon roll. It's definitely on that side.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to have a character like that because you don't see them very often in fiction. Like this specific kind of Asian message.
For sure.
It's hot. And I think that people can appreciate it. I mean, people watch K-dramas and they're all like, oh yeah, that guy's hot. I was like, yeah, they're hot. You know,
Yeah.
it's great.
I think
So
everyone
celebrate that.
He's a sexy nerd.
He is a total sexy nerd.
So I'm hearing the speaker beeping weird, so I'm gonna turn it off.
Oh,
And
okay.
then if anyone can't hear you, just let me know. Because I don't want anyone to be distracted by the beeping speaker. Okay.
I think both the mics have gone out.
That is probably why.
All right.
So, friends in the back, if you can't hear, I think we're going to try to get back to you, but just give us a shout. No, you're good. Wonderful. Okay. So, kind of speaking of Tony sexy moments, clothes are such an interesting kind of aspect of the character's identity in this story. Like, you have Jing who hates wearing her Chao because she can't move and she can't like do anything without flashing people and then getting in trouble. And she wants to wear a suit. She wants to wear a wide skirt, or she wants to wear like one of the like Western men's suits. And then when we see Tony in a Chang Pao instead of a suit for the first time, like we get to see a side of him that's more confident, sexier. What is like the magic alchemy of clothes in this book? for you?
You pointing that out is really interesting because I've never thought of that before. I was like, oh, yeah, actually,
He
that
like
is,
comes out of the changing room and she's like, oh my.
yeah, it's like, ooh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think the book is really a celebration, very much of diaspora experiences, and so, like, with Jing, definitely the Qihao being so constraining is, it's a metaphor for her whole life that people are telling her, don't do this, don't show your knees, don't move like that, be more polite, be more demure, don't be quite so, don't spit so much. Don't be such a feral,
Stop
like,
packing up the loogie on
and like a Qihao is kind of like that. Ugh, she's supposed to do it like that. She's just like, she wants to run. She lifts the Qihao right up, so her butt's hanging up, and she's like, I can't run unless I do this. So stop being so precious. So yeah, and like the fact that she is this mix of heritages, and I like the idea that she could, she's comfortable. Like this is the whole idea of feminism, like that you can be feminine and also be a feminist. Like that everything's okay. It's just about
I love her.
right values, and so she is comfortable in a skirt so long as it allows her to move.
Yes.
And she's comfortable in trousers because they allow her to move. And then like Tony, like. This is interesting. I'm just kind of riffing now because I'm thinking, like, yeah, it made him sexier when he puts on his tongue pop. So I don't know if that's just she identifies better with him in that sense. When I write things, it's not like I specifically put in themes that I know that I'm going to do it like this. Sometimes it just comes out and it's like, oh, wow, good job, Alice.
I'm a genius.
Like, good job. I totally meant to do that from the outset. Yeah, so yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was so cool. I also love where he's eating something with powdered sugar on it, and she's like, and he had powdered sugar. It's like, like she's noticing.
She's noticing. Yeah. And I mean, it's cute because she doesn't really, like, it's first love. She doesn't know what that is, and so she doesn't notice that she's noticing things.
Yeah.
She's just like, I'm not looking at him.
That was one of my favorite things to read. Was like, when in a story you can tell someone's falling in love and they haven't admitted it to themselves. So she'll be like feeling something. She'll be like, I think I'm ill.
Yeah, totally. Like just so clueless. Like just not. She's like, I notice something is happening, but I'm gonna totally discount it and think it's something else. Yeah.
Yeah, it helps that she's a vampire, and so she has like kind of effects from people's blood. And so that can kind of cross the wires for her a little bit too.
Yeah, and I mean we're all a little chaotic. She's extremely chaotic. So.
Oh, she's chaotic. Yeah. Would you say she's like chaotic good, chaotic neutral?
Oh, okay. So I'm not very good with these, but I would say she's chaotic lawless. Is that right?
That's chaotic. Is what you just said.
Yeah, she's just like
she's true chaotic.
She doesn't do any of the. You think, oh, yeah, you'll have this like, oh, you should do the right thing, and she's like, no, that's the other way. And you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah, I'm really interested by like she's this like very irreverent, very rebellious, like young or at least young at heart because she's 100 character. But the whole story draws a lot on like Chinese classical thought and philosophy. And at the beginning, Jing is super resistant to like Confucian standards that are being imposed on her. And she's kind of being reprimanded for not meeting. But by the end, it seems like she's really changed her way of thinking about a lot of those things. How did you like balance that one? Like, what does her journey look like in your mind, philosophically?
So I think she still isn't fully on board, but I think she learns to adult, like where you're not always, compromised, where you might not say exactly what you think, or you might not do exactly what you want to.
Yeah.
But you can temper those. It doesn't mean that you are fully committing to like, oh, I totally buy this, or I totally don't buy it. It's more like, okay, well, maybe in this situation I can, file down those corners a little.
Yeah, it feels like she learns a little that like she doesn't have to accept anything, but she doesn't have to like reject things just to do it. Like she can kind of have the agency to
and I think like her whole journey is a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And that comes with what she experiences and learns. And I think when you have that, then it means that she doesn't, maybe, like, I would like to think, I mean, I'm writing book 2 right now, so maybe she hasn't really learned that much. But at the end of the story, she's supposed to learn enough to be like, I'm gonna pause. I'm not just gonna impulsively declare it like this. It's, do you know what I mean? Like, impulsively reject something or impulsively embrace it 100%. Like, she can take a pause and be like, hey, what I thought before wasn't right. Like, I believed something that was true, so maybe I should, just kind of consider this a little bit, pause, think before I do. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's what I like her to do. Whether she actually carries that through into book 2 or not, it remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's good to hear that she gets to kind of keep rebelling.
Yeah, she's definitely. I mean, like, she's got. I don't think you can file away anger management problems quite so easily. You know, it's just still fiery. She's still got a bad temper.
Yeah. I find it really interesting throughout the book that like the people who've raised her have taught her some key anger management strategies. They've taught her, like, you've probably heard the old like she counts to 10, but sometimes she has to count to 100. Sometimes she gets distracted and throws a cocktail on somebody.
Yeah. So she's supposed to do all those things, but sometimes in the heat of the moment. Sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it's different. The theory of doing something like that is very different than I was just mortally insulted.
Exactly, right?
I would love to talk a little bit about the role food plays in this book, because it's full of sweet treats and xiaolong bao and fancy cocktails. And I would love to know, I have 2 big questions. And one is, are her favorite foods your favorite foods? And 2 is, are the cocktails a real, especially, careful, a cuss is coming, the flaming bitch? Is that a real cocktail?
No, I don't think so. Honestly, I need to look at my notes. I don't think that one is. A lot of the cocktails are based on historical cocktails that were popular in the 1930s, like the Stenga, which I think it's just a gin tonic, but they called it that back then. The flaming bitch and the suffering bastard. I think those are
They're really good.
Yeah. I'd love to do a cocktail book with, like,
You should.
it'd be so fun. So fun. So those most of them are real. Some of them are made up. And what was the other question?
Oh, the other one was, are her favorite foods your favorite foods?
Except for the blood. Yes. Yeah. Pretty much.
The blood does add a little something.
Yeah, it's a little extra. I refrain from that.
Yeah, that's probably for the best.
Yeah.
It's lovely the way, like, I feel like it's such a comfort thing for her. Like, she has foods that she'll go back to if she's, like, in a tough spot or, like, needs to be comforted.
Yeah, and, like, for me, food is very much a community thing, and it's interesting mostly if you look at books, if there's a lot of food, there tends to be a lot of comfort in the story. Whereas, like, a lack of food, like, I was talking to Shelley Parker Chan, who is the author of Sheep Who Becomes the Sun. There's
Which
almost,
is amazing.
It's amazing, but there's almost no kind of, like, enjoyed food where they can stop and rest and enjoy the food. There's a distinct lack. Like, at the beginning is about a famine, right? And the lack of food and how it's, like, survival and not about comfort. And she was like, oh yeah, like, I think adding favorite foods and kind of things like that really adds a layer of cozy. There's, like, safety there.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. And it really, like, that is a decisive difference too.
Yeah. And I mean, like, all of Shelley's characters, I mean, this is, like, just one little thing to talk about, but they're all alone. They're very much alone, and they don't
really
get to have that comfort. Yeah.
That is also, interestingly, like, one of the other books that I've heard use the same form of, like, courtly address.
Yes.
That you use in, like, courtly speech.
Yeah.
I was like, I remember.
Yeah, Shelley's
Learning
is
that
a little
Shelley's.
more, like, proper.
Yeah.
Mine is just like, she's being an asshole.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you are a quote-unquote recovering lawyer. I'm wondering if there are glimpses, like, I feel like I caught glimpses of your legal background a tiny bit in the book. Because there are times when she's like contractually under Article 39B of the Covenant with Hell.
Of course, yes.
You suck.
Yeah, I like the bureaucracy and like the whole, like with like British law is very much like there's like articles and various regulations. It's all very codified, and so having that, and I mean like the whole Immortal Shanghai is meant to be extremely bureaucratic.
Yes.
So the whole idea of having these specific treaties and these articles that you have to comply with just made me laugh. I think it's funny. I think it's funny that deities have to like we have these laws and rules that we all like basically all powerful beings, but we have to follow rule 2.5 over there.
And they really have to negotiate everything out.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kind of, I mean, if you're a huge dork like I am, it's fun to watch them kind of like cobble out the sausage of how they're gonna deal with each other and each other's like.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're like immortal and you're all powerful and you all have to live together forever and get on, I'm like, oh yeah, well let's slam some like regulations and laws in there and make you kind of sense. Make you comply with them.
Yeah, you've got to abide each other one way or another. Do any of your characters? This is fully random, but I always wonder this. Do you associate specific songs with any of your characters in Shanghai Immortal?
The only one is Lady Jing. So when I heard Baba's new swag, my new swag song, I think it's in the Crazy Rich Asians soundtrack. I was like, that is Lady Jing. Like that is Lady Jing. Like this kind of swagger and like look at me, but also very much like FU energy at the same time. Yeah, that's like that's. The other ones I'm like, oh, I'm not really.
She's an unstoppable. It's like unstoppable force, and all the immovable objects in the room are flying out of her path. It's like
she was so much fun to write. Yeah, totally.
And she's amazing to read, and I'm so excited for all of you to read about her. I have like 1.5 more questions.
Okay.
One, are there any modern foods you wish that Jim could try? Like that have come about since 1935.
Oh,
And that might be improved with a little human blood, even.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's a really modern food?
I guess like
Walnut salad. Like
that is kind of
it's like from the 70s.
yeah.
Or like Jello.
Yeah,
Is that you? I don't know. Is it Alka
I guess food hasn't changed really that much since the 30s. I now realize
junk food, candy bars.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, like hot Cheetos. She would, I think, enjoy a hot Cheeto, perhaps.
Maybe Pop-Tarts. I don't know. I feel like her teeth would rot out of her head.
Yeah. Well, my last question is there anything else that you would like to share about this?
I can tell you a little bit about book 2. Yeah. So book 2 is called Paris Celestial, which is not a secret. It's actually like they've publishers like sent out all the metadata, so it's already on Amazon, so it's not a secret. But it's set in Paris, and it's going to be exploring Jing's vampire side. So she gets to hang out with some of her vampire family, and the vampires are not quite, they're a little bit like the old school vampires, like Anne Rice, True Blood, but they're more so like what we do in the Shadows vampires.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so they're kind of like, they're a little messy too.
Oh, this is such a good vampire moment too.
Yeah,
We've really got some.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
So that's coming out next year.
Cannot wait. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up to any questions the audience might have.
Hi. Did you know this was going to be a multi-book series when you started it, and how did you decide which direction you wanted to go in the future books?
Oh, this is a fun question because I wrote this as a standalone. And when I queried it, or when my agent started to shop it around on Sub, and I think this is pretty standard, my agent had me write a synopsis for book 2. And I was like, okay, I'm a discovery writer, so I don't plan things. I just write them. And so having to plan a story that I wasn't writing was very strange. It took me about 10 iterations for him to be like, okay, this is a story. So he shopped that around. We got an offer for 2 books, and then it went to a 5-way auction. And the editor who bought it, when they were doing the auction, she read the synopsis and she's like, "Oh, this is a cliffhanger," which I was like, "Oh yeah," and like, "Yeah, I ended it on a cliffhanger." She's like, "Is there more?" And I was like, "Sure." And she's like, "Oh, good, we'll do a 3-book deal." And I was like, So I had to go back and talk to my agent because I was like, I don't know. I didn't know whether there was 3 stories in there. But we decided, yeah, sure, there was. We could do it. So I said, okay. I'm still not sure. I'm like, I have a vague idea of where I want it to go. So wish me luck. It is exciting. It's not, it'll be more exciting when I finish book 2.
So I read this months ago when it came out in Fairly Box.
Oh, you got that.
Loved it, and I've been hungover from it for a while. So, what books would you recommend to read, both to like deal with the book hangover and to prepare for book 2?
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's a good question. And thank you for reading it. And the Fairy Loot version is so pretty. I'm really happy with it. Tonally, I really like Gideon the Ninth. I think Gideon and Harrow, and even like Nona, even though Nona is bonkers, I was like, what is happening? I loved it. I loved it so much. Cozy wise, Travis Baldry's Legends and Lattes is really fun. Oh, the second one. I have that on my bookshelf. It's on my TBR. I can't wait. Then we've got coming out. There's Eliza Chance Fab Folk is coming out, but it's coming out in June, so it'll be out at the same time as book 2. Who else is coming out? Rosalie Lynn's Daughter of Calamity is set in 1930 Shanghai. And I feel like in terms of spirit, they're siblings. They jive really well spiritually. Tonally, they're very different. Hers is way more like noir, gangster, dark. But it's set in the same place. You'll see like some of the same places. Like the Paramount features in both of them. And I feel like Jing would get on really well with the Daughter of Calamity's main character as well. So that might help. But that doesn't help you because that's also about you. Sorry. Who else am I thinking? Daughter of the Moon Goddess. That's got the really nice. Oh, Emily Lin Zhao. She has 2 out. Song of something with a really beautiful blue cover, and then her second book, the sequel to that, is also out, and it's all kind of like mythology and very pretty and lots of Christmas. So that might help.
Any other questions?
Sorry?
What did your research process look like?
Because I'm a discovery writer, I don't know what I need to know until I get to the point where I'm trying to describe something, and I'm like, I don't know what I need. Like, I don't know how this works. So then I go and I research and I read and then come back. So the memoirs I read throughout the drafting process, but specific things like Tootsie Rolls, when they were developed and made, whether they were available, salted caramels, electricity, what the roads, whether they were made of asphalt or concrete or dirt or whatever. Those are things that I researched as I was writing.
What's your favorite part of the writing process, and what's your least favorite part of the writing process?
Favorite part is when I'm finished. My least favorite part is, when I'm uncertain. That's really horrible because you just kind of have this anxiety where I want to do this, but what if it's wrong, or what if it's going to ruin things, and then you spend all that time. So I don't like that feeling. But it is part and parcel of the whole process. So I just have to suck it up and stop being a baby.
Any more questions? Going twice? Going thrice? Alrighty. Thank you so much for being here. This has been lovely.
Thank you too.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. So, anyone who would like to pick up a book, we have them there on the cart. And I believe that Alice will be doing